Welcome to the Back Office Show, your peek behind the privacy curtain of successful healthcare operations. Get ready to learn how every bedpan is a potential gold mine in every staff meeting, a strategic summit. All right, I'm getting a little carried away here. Get ready to learn from the grandmasters of healthcare, their secrets for success. And now, let's welcome your host, Steve Shane.
Welcome back to the Back Office Show. We really appreciate you guys always tuning in, listening, watching, however you're getting this podcast. We're really excited today, firstly, for our wonderful guest, the president and CEO, the new president and CEO of American Healthcare Association, Clif Porter. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Steve. Glad to be here.
We're so happy to have you. We're looking forward to a great conversation. Secondly, aside from the fact that we have you, I think what everybody listening will be excited for as well are the topics that we're going to talk about are things that may have not been touched on in healthcare conversations. And Clif, I think, has a great perspective on a lot of this. So if you guys continue listening, I think there'll be a lot that we can all learn from Clif. And I, for sure, will be one that will be learning a lot. So I'm looking forward to this conversation, Clif.
Thanks. Me too.
Now that I put so much introduction, like now we're putting the stakes pretty high. So we better perform now.
Absolutely.
So I think a good place to start, being that you are a new face to some people, although you've been with American Healthcare Association for so long, but for many people, they're familiar with Mark Parkinson, who we've actually had the honor of interviewing here as well. And now we have you. Can you give us a little bit of background? I just want to point out that when we were at the Healthcare Association of New Jersey conference recently, you got up there to speak and you immediately connected with the 500 or so people sitting there because you spoke their language. You showed them that you lived and breathed what they live and breathe. And that connection is something that people pick up right away when they understand your experiences and what you've done. So if we can hear a little bit about that, I think it would be very valuable.
Thanks again for having me, and really excited about the podcast and the opportunity to share a little bit. And as it relates to my background, I always say it kind of starts, you can always say it starts with your family. And I think particularly without me even knowing it, I sort of had a heart for seniors early on in my life. My mother, I had my grandparents taking care of me as a little kid, and I kind of, just became besties with my granddad. And my granddad was pretty much significantly older than I was. He was born in 1910. And really just enjoyed his company, and so much so that even when I was a teenager, started driving, I would drive to see him and spend time with him. And my grandmother had MS, so my granddad took care of her himself, her entire life, his entire life, at home. She was wheelchair bound and incontinent. And so I sort of saw in the very beginning of my life, and really throughout most of my childhood, forgiving, for lack of a better term. And unbeknownst to myself, I probably had a soft spot for that and didn't really even know it. So, as I got out of high school and started exploring careers, I had an uncle that was involved, a cousin rather, that was involved in health administration. He was a hospital administrator. I talked to him about, where should I go to school? Tell me about what you do. He kind of gave me some ideas. And then I ultimately did a volunteer internship at a local hospital when I was an undergrad, and I hated it. I just hated it. I was with this, I did rounds in the different departments. I was in medical records, what they called medical records in those days. Now I understand why you hated it. Yeah, so charts and all that stuff. This was crazy. Then I would shadow the CEO, but I just felt that it was a very detached role. Particularly with the patients themselves. So I stumbled upon a career day, and there was this track in an undergrad where you could major in healthcare management and concentrate in long-term care. And this was in the mid-'80s. And at that time, we were in a pretty significant construction boom for nursing homes. And that's how I decided to start my career. So that happened, volunteered at a local nursing home, and kind of the rest is history. Became an AHCA, became an administrator. I was an administrator for about 8 years, then became a regional vice president, did that for about another 7. And then the last 20 years, I've been doing advocacy work. Started with AHCA Manor Care, running and building their government relations department when they were in existence, and did sort of built it from the ground up. They were the largest player in the space at the time, and didn't have a department at all. We were in 32 states at the time operating. So we built out a fully functioning GR department, and then answered the call to come to AHCA to work with Mark to run government affairs for the association nationally. Done that for the last 11 years, and lo and behold, all of you out there in the board are asked me to more or less take on the CEO president role, which I'm super excited about. So that's a minute and a half overview of my career.
It's been phenomenal. That's really, really phenomenal. And if I can understand, just in regards to your age at the time, when you became an AIT administrator, how old are you?
I was 22.
Wow.
Yeah, I think that's important. That you make an important point there. It's something I say often when I talk to folks. I mean, one of the biggest concerns I've got, and I think it's just something we have to focus on as a sector, is, leadership. And, I've learned over the years that, the best buildings have the best leaders, and good leaders develop good leaders. And, you have good leaders that are nursing assistants, good leaders that are dietary aides, good leaders that are housekeepers, good leaders that are administrators, good leaders that are department heads. But, you need to have the more layers of good leadership that you are able to develop in a facility, the better the outcomes are ultimately for the patient. The one thing about our business is that, and it makes it very unique. And what's unique about it is that a young person can get in this career and really make decisions of consequence. Running a facility is a $15 million operation. Usually you're accountable for 150 staff members. You're responsible for compliance. You're responsible for ensuring that people are taken care of and that they stay alive and well. You're responsible for taking care of your staff. You're responsible for the finances, the marketing, the legal aspects of risk management. I mean, you just get this
roll 20 hats at a time.
Yeah, absolutely. Where can you get that in your 20s, that kind of exposure? And there's no other sector in America, I think, you can get that kind of exposure. So fundamentally, you get a leadership base early. And I think by the time, our administrators are in their 30s, if they stay with it, you developed a skill set that the most people in business don't get until they're in their 40s or 50s. So it provides a unique opportunity. I'm really bullish about, making sure that we're kind of preaching the gospel of long-term care and try to get other 22-year-olds to make the decision to join us.
It's a great point. And are you saying, if I understand, that because those 22-year-olds, however young they are getting their administrator license, but they have good leaders and good mentors that are showing them the ropes, they're able to handle so much responsibility despite the fact that they may be younger or inexperienced coming into it?
No question. You get to practice your decision making. You get to learn how to manage risks. You get to learn how to take risks. You learn how to manage people, make tough decisions, make difficult decisions. I always remember, I had the hardest time firing people. And, it's just something that bothered me. And when I had to do it, it just bothered me. And a good mentor of mine, I went to him, and I was a regional at the time, and this administrator just was not working out. We tried everything. And I just told him I was struggling. And, instead of fussing at me, this mentor said, Clif, it's called being human. And what you're doing is being a human being. And no human being wants to tell someone that they don't have a job anymore. And so the fact that it keeps you up at night makes me feel good. That's good. It shows me that you're human. He said, you still got to do it. He said, so that's not going to change. But don't beat yourself up. It's not supposed to be fun.
So instead of feeling guilty, you feel like you have to do what you have to do, but as a human being, you're doing the right thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And his point was, that you want to maintain their humanity and their dignity. And that should be the goal, as you part ways. He said, just be about maintaining their humanity and their dignity as you do it. And he said, I'll make it better. And he was really right about that. So, I just think, again, it's just no better field in America. You can get a training like no other industry in the world, and again, just be by the time you're 30 something, you're more experienced than most.
Absolutely. It's such a good point. And I'm sure any administrators listening to it can identify exactly with that, because as they're listening to this, they probably have people calling into their office about different fires they have to put out and different issues with family members. So they're living it, and you know it because you've lived it too. And you mentioned that from there, you kind of went in on HCR Manicure to the government relations. A lot of people aren't familiar with what that is. What exactly are you doing? Where are you interacting, or were you interacting with government, so people can get a better idea of it?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, it was something I was really trying to figure out. Frankly, I was building the plane as we were flying. You're in 32 states, you're spread out geographically. So you really have to think about, okay, how do I more or less manage my time most effectively? So I made a decision that I was going to focus on 7 because 70% of our Medicaid revenue came from those 7 states. And then I was going to trust the associations to manage the other 25. And if I needed to go in, I would, but I would more or less follow their lead. So essentially government affairs is engaging in managing, supporting, first of all, developing the strategy, and 2, managing that strategy and the tactics to hopefully ultimately get the outcome you want, whatever that may be. And the outcomes vary. It could be a reimbursement issue. It could be a regulatory issue. In the case of Medicare, you could be selling your company and you have to get approvals, right, for those ownership changes to happen. So you have to go and go before committees and hearings and those kind of things. So you can be building a new facility in a particular market, and you need somebody to actually go in there and go before the city council to get the approvals of that. And then you have the Washington component, which, at times get involved in some of the DC efforts and the strategies there.
Which I know you've been heavily involved in.
Absolutely. And I got my first exposure, significant exposure of that while I was at AHCA Manicure. So, you get out there and you really just build relationships. And I always say you try to change minds. That's really what it's about. It's about getting out there and discord sales, to be honest with you. But you're selling ideas. You're selling solutions versus a tangible product.
I like that you put it that it's sales. You're selling something in that conversation. But if I can understand, are the people on the other end, on the government side or on Capitol Hill, are they completely oblivious to what the needs are in the industry? Or do they have a developed opinion and you need to convince them out of it, which is obviously harder? But how much do they really know when you come in to address something?
Yeah, it's both. They're oblivious and intransigent. The law is the same time. Yeah, which is the worst. Oblivious and intransigent. And that's not all the cases. One good point, I'll say today, which, we had a election that just occurred, and one of our members' wives got elected to Congress, and she is an administrator. So we have an administrator that is a member of the House of Representatives starting in January from South Carolina that actually sat in the chair and did the job. So there's a member that actually fully understands.
We've got an inside woman now.
No question. Which is exciting. We had that in the past, believe it or not. There's another member of Congress that's a licensed administrator currently. So we have a couple sprinkled in there. But I think to your point about sort of being oblivious and intransigent, what that essentially means is this. I mean, they don't understand what we do. And they have a view that's formed largely by the press and largely by, what we all suffer from is our own guilt. My mom, whom I adored, and think about, 8 times a day, passed away in 2020 and started her journey with dementia in 2017. So, I became a family member, caregiver pretty quickly. And, I get the call from a neighbor. I remember where I was. Your mom, you need to come see about your mom right now. She couldn't find her way home from the grocery store. Some strange man led her home. Thank God he was a nice man. but she's vulnerable. So I go down, I spend some time and realize that something's definitely wrong, and ultimately move her back from Charlotte up to DC area where I am, and get her settled and take care of her. But I think, the point of all that is just that we, you kind of have a responsibility to do these things. It's tough. And I think, I learned pretty quickly that, I was guilt-ridden that I had to put her, or at least get her cared for in the way that we did. And I'm somebody that does it all the time. It's been my life. But, she didn't want to be there. She fussed at me about it, said some mean things to me about it. Who are you? Who do you think you are? All the things that I watched as a third party. When this is your family, I'll never forget sitting down. Yeah, I sat down and did a care plan, her first care plan. And then I'm sitting there as the family member, and then they're going through, I know everything they're going to say. And I just start bawling. And I told them I'm sorry. I just said, I know what you're doing. I can't believe I'm here. But the reality is that every one of our customers feels guilty that they can't do what we do for their person that they love. So they almost feel like, I should be doing this. But they can't. That we're not capable of doing it anymore as a society. And then two, not only do they feel guilty about doing it, clearly in most cases, family members don't want to be in a healthcare facility. Nobody does. I don't want to be. I don't want to be in a hospital. I want to be well and I want to be home. So you've got that guilt. And so when you combine all that, it's a situation where I don't care what we do, we're sort of behind the eight ball because start off as a nobody. Yeah, you start off like a -10, and you're just trying to work your way back to zero, where we're trying to get a fair start, and that's the best way to describe it. I think every admission is a -10, and the administrator and leadership's goal is to get them back to being fair, and that just takes time. It takes hard work, but those are the kind of things we have to work with. I mean, again, I think members of Congress, meaning particularly the staff, they come of that view. You guys don't do your job well. Why do we house people the way we do? Folks need to be home. You guys are money-grubbing folks that just take advantage of old people. And all of that is not informed by realities. It's much more based on hyperbole and perception.
Absolutely. And that's a tough job. It's a tough job in a facility, but it's a tough job as somebody that's advocating for the industry to be able to change their mind and educate them, which you really said is sales. You have to convince them otherwise. And this really segues into the other question, which I wanted to ask you, Clif. When you see an organization that maybe has 30, 40, 50 facilities spread in multiple states, none of them, as far as I know, really put a focus on the GR government relations side. I know from what we deal with on the managed care side, there's constant relationship building you need to do. You need to always get both sides of it to be able to try to figure out how you can advocate best for the portfolio, for the facilities that may be having a tough time. Because on the other side, if that other party doesn't understand you, you're not going to be successful. On government relations, we don't see it. Is that because people are leaning on their state or the association itself? Is there a need for a government relations position in a particular size portfolio? When do you think, or do you think it's necessary?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's somewhat situational. I think from the perspective of GR professionals, particularly as companies get larger, I think it becomes more important. I don't know what the magic number is, but in my view, once you get past 50, you probably should start thinking about it, and particularly if you're in multiple states, you really should think about it. Because that's essentially the more risk that you have. And GR is somewhat of a risk management function as well. I mean, it really is more of a risk management function, meaning that, I always used to share that, I think GR is it's not about like an operator, when you're running a facility, you got to make sure your expenses are under budget, you drive your census, you have good quality metrics, and, they're very discrete measurables. in government affairs, it's really about ensuring that you're managing what I call the business environment. Like my job is to make sure that we have a more favorable business environment. And I can't control the marketing program. I can't control, any of those metrics, but I can create or help create a more favorable business environment. So what does that mean? I can impact the regulatory environment in a way that maybe improves quality versus inhibits it. I can, maybe enhance or help enhance the reimbursement so that we have the resources that we need to pay these exorbitant salaries that we had to deal with post-COVID. It could be from a development perspective, helping to facilitate the ability for expansion. So if I've got a growth mindset, and that's another, I think, element that has to be thought through. If I'm in growth mode, and I know that I'm going to be buying 40 buildings, that's a whole lot of change ownership documents have to be done. That's a whole lot of hearings have to be managed. Maybe it makes sense to have somebody else manage that. And that's kind of where GR comes into play. So that's the job. And I think it's a very important one, but it's one that I think evolves and is a little bit more situational just based on not only facility size, but geography as well as the company's goals.
I think that's a very good way of putting it, that you want to basically make the business environment a healthy environment for them to do whatever they need to do. You're kind of maintaining that business environment. And part of the business environment, aside from government relations, I believe is also the public relations, the PR point. And I know you posted recently a viral video that was going around on LinkedIn. If anybody is not following Clif yet on LinkedIn, you should, because he has a lot of great stuff to share. One of the things he posted, if people are not familiar, it was about a Dr. Derek. He was a failing student, and his teacher believed in him when no one else did. He was really appreciative. And what was amazing in the video is that he got the opportunity many, many years later, as he became a surgeon, to give that teacher the life-saving surgery that she needed, and he paid back the favor. And it went viral because it told a story that people could identify with about perseverance. And really, in the healthcare realm, I think that something in that realm also, PR would be something that could change that business environment to one where people don't look at a facility and say, oh, you guys are money grabbers, mistreating people, or whatever bad slurs they're going to use. But they realize what amazing work is being done for people's family members and how they're really helping. Is there more of a focus that should be put here, and how could we do that, Clif?
Yeah. PR is an interesting phenomenon. I always say, we talked about it a lot, and we often talk about it. And somebody says, there's always a movement or a thought process. We need to do it. No, we need people to. We need a huge PR effort to help change minds about long-term care. Again, I think, when you look at something as broad and global and expensive as Got Milk, and it was very expensive, we're not in a position as an industry to do that, number one. And number two, we did take a stab at it 15 or so years ago. And what we found is, as we made investments in PR, particularly what I call broad scale messaging, positive public imaging, and on a grand coordinated scale, yeah, we moved the numbers, but as soon as we stopped making the investment, the numbers went back down. So what that means is that whatever we were to spend, we would have to spend it perpetually to make a difference. And the difference wasn't dramatic enough to justify the expense. So I think it then gets down to, well, what can we do? And one thing I'm a big believer in is social media. I think social media is a powerful tool. And social media makes all of us producers. We can be movie producers. All of us are. And as you noted, I'm on LinkedIn, and I usually, if not all of my professional stuff goes through LinkedIn. And I actually draft it myself. And it's random things that I may see or observe that are interesting to me, or motivating to me, or inspiring to me. And it's just amazing how many people will pick that up, forward it, and then you realize all of a sudden, wait a minute, 30,000 people just saw this thing and responded to it in some way. And that example of that particular story was an important one. But the things that I think our members can do which I wish you wouldn't. You'll see in my posts, I often post it. Post when people rehab and go home. Post the stories. The stories of somebody that actually got better. There was a story I just posted recently of a guy named Rodney who was in a facility in North Carolina who had a stroke, who was finally going home to live with his brother in Maryland. And he was kind of a younger side of a younger side of life. But he had fully, recovered enough to get home and he met his goals. So I repost that.
Because people see the continuum of care, they kind of see the full circle.
Absolutely. Because what that does is it shows people that everybody doesn't just go to a nursing home to die. Most of our patients actually do go home. If you think about it, most patients go home. People don't know that. And again, back to your point about stories people can feel. You can feel it when, somebody's telling the story about the fact that I get to go home and be with my wife for 50 years after spending, 3 months in this facility. I couldn't walk, I couldn't eat. Now I can do all these things, and I'm now home. That's a different type of PR. And I think that those are the kind of things that all of us can become sort of mini Steven Spielbergs, if you will, and start posting that kind of information and put it out there. And that in and of itself begins to expose people to the kinds of stories that they need to see. And ideally help change the tide as it relates to perception.
So you're saying all of us should be ambassadors. All members should be finding these things. And when you see something that talks to this point, put it out there. Let other people know about it. And slowly we can change how people perceive things by actually doing something to give them the information that they don't have.
That's it. Bingo.
I like it. I know facilities from time to time will also do some of their own kind of admissions marketing videos or things like that, where they kind of pull those stories out from their own unique facilities. Just an idea also, if people take some of those stories and take those clips and promote those in a way that it says the same story, you don't need to be the Steven Spielberg. Somebody already was. You're just the advocate or the ambassador that's sharing it to get it a little further than maybe it would have gotten naturally, organically.
No doubt. Great point.
Okay. I think that's a very important piece that I'm glad we gave that attention. And it's something that I think is not spoken about enough. But let's talk about the general industry. You're now seated as CEO president of AHCA. We got a new administration, obviously. We've got changes in Congress. You're uniquely positioned to try to look and focus about what change do I want to see. I know when I spoke with Mark, he's very into metrics and very into measurables. And obviously, you believe in that too. So are there any metrics? I know at some point you mentioned you would love to eliminate the 3-day hospital stay, but is there something that you would love to accomplish? You would love for the industry and the policymakers to change that you think would be beneficial for the industry?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and most is a mile long. So, well, I'm gonna go a mile long. I'll just give you my top couple. And to me, it's one of the biggest rocks of all, and that is, we've got to rationalize our regulatory environment. I think our government doesn't fully understand how mutated our regulatory system has become. When I started in the industry in 1989, over 87 was just being implemented. So that's when we actually changed and shifted to the survey system with F tags and, the variety of different domains. We hit MDS 1.0. Well, it was the first. I was the first. Yeah, first year out. We had MDS 1.0. And believe it or not, people don't know this because they're just, all of us that were around are old and retired now. But in 1990, the 3-day stay was suspended. There was no 3-day stay. For our president for a year, George H.W. Bush essentially eliminated the 3-day stay. So for all of 1990, there was no 3-day stay. Now expenses went out I just exploded. And as a result, they ended that pretty quickly. But
you know what? 30 years later in COVID, we had it also postponed. So we have a better picture for those that remember that.
No question. And I think to your point, and we're using this, frankly, to your 3-day stay argument or point, and that's on the list too. When you look at the information, only there was a very moderate increase in usage of services, even with the 3-day stay eliminated. So we're talking like 6% or so more waivers or more 3-day stays for each at the bedside. So there's a huge opportunity on that front, in my view, because if you think about the 3-day stay is as old as the program, but the program started in 1965. It's older than me. And you've got a construct that has lasted, almost 60 years. And healthcare looks nothing like it did in 1965 today. So that's something that should change. We need to rationalize our regulatory environment. It's another big issue that I think we fundamentally need to focus on. The last one I'll at least mention, and as I said, the list is long, is, we've got to have, in my view, a much more serious and constructive and dramatic approach to developing the healthcare workforce. It's projected to be a 350 to 400,000 RN structural shortfall by next year.
At the same time as you have the silver tsunami, people aging and having so many more people that need the care.
Exactly. And all that's going to do is just get worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And that applies to every category of caregiver. And that doesn't just apply to our setting. Frankly, it applies to every setting in healthcare. Hospitals have the same problem with certain physicians, extenders, it goes on and on. So the reality is you have a massive crisis that is going to explode, and in my view, potentially seize the entire healthcare continuum. But we don't do something about it. And
the government did something about it. They made a staffing mandate. Wouldn't that help?
Right. Is that and that's the lunacy of it all. And we were able to start to at least convey the lunacy of that idea being a solution. But the point is a good one though. But workforce, obviously just continues to be something that we need to have, a new deal. I use the New Deal analogy. My friend, I got a colleague, Brian Perry, at Direct Supply. He calls it, a Marshall Plan. But either analogy is something just gargantuan. The government needs to spend $100 billion on developing the healthcare workforce for the future. And if they made that kind of investment in universities and technical programs, if they gave regulatory relief to facilities where we could do more CNA training in our facilities, and really approach this strategically, we could meet the need. But until we do something like that, we're going to have serious problems. I'm not worried about it right now, but I'm worried about when I turn 80. I mean,
it's a personal agenda here. Absolutely.
And look, I'm 57 and it hit me the other day. It's like, I'm not far from 80. That's 23 years. It's 23 years ago. I was 34. I remember being 34. I remember. It wasn't that long ago. I had 3 kids. I got 3 kids now. So
you wouldn't mention it would have thought you're 34, but hey,
pictures out there. I had much more hair there, believe me.
But some people think that with technology and whatever it is, it's going to change. The human touch and the human care is always necessary, and the issue that you're perceiving is going to be there. Yes, they may eliminate some of the work that technology can help, but you can't replace the actual care that people need. Caregivers are always going to be needed, and that shortage has to be dealt with regardless of where technology is going.
No question. The technology issue, and I respect it, and I do believe that it will absolutely help revolutionize the delivery of care. To your point, it doesn't replace a touch. It doesn't replace a handhold. It doesn't replace a smile. It doesn't resolve loneliness. It does none of that. And all those things is ultimately what kills us. Loneliness is the killer at the end of the day. And human beings are the only ones can do that. So, even young ones. So that's the other point we got to keep in mind. I think about, being an administrator, you described when I started, I was 22. Yeah, man, I was 22. I had different set of knees, different set of legs, different set of eyes. I was agile, mobile, able to move around the facility, engaged, able to stay up late, going at 3 a.m. I just had the energy to do the job. RNs, LPNs, CNAs. It's a younger person's gig. Lifting up a patient out of the bed is not for the 57-year-old. That's for the 25-year-old. And we got to get folks interested. And again, when I get to this regulatory rationalization piece that I talked about earlier, the government doesn't understand that this construct discourages folks from wanting to be in our field. They'd rather be in a physician office. And you see that in our employment data. Physician offices, hospice, hospitals, all these other areas of healthcare have more workers than they did prior to the pandemic. We're the only area that has less. And the reality is that I can go over there and not have to worry about the survey. I have to worry about, all the stress associated with regulatory compliance. I can still be a nurse and just do it somewhere else. We got to fix that. We got to eliminate some of this stuff so that it's rational. So that people are like, you know what? Everything that I felt or feel meeting patients and engaging with them, that's the plus. All the leadership opportunities I get, all the exposure I articulated earlier in our conversation, that's a plus. But do I really want to risk my livelihood over a bad survey? Do I want to, deal with that in my career when I can do something else? I don't want to do long-term care. I'll go do something else. And we got to eliminate the barrier.
We need to make a complete overhaul in order to change that.
No doubt.
And now for the other part of the coin, the other side of the coin, we spoke about what you'd want to change on policy. What would you like to see providers change and operators change? And before you answer the question, I'll just note as a disclaimer, this is going to be airing before ECAP in February. So some of the providers, you will have to face whatever you say, but I'm sure that whatever you're going to say is going to be constructive. But I'd love to hear what you think would make your job easier when you're advocating and going to bat for providers.
Well, look, all of my providers, the vast majority of everybody out there does a great job, and I'm really proud to represent you. So, again, I'm not going to fall into the narrative that the press tries to paint about us, that we're all bad, horrible. We're majority very good.
Absolutely.
And mostly well-intended. I think, again, when it comes to what we can do, there are a couple things, and you'll learn this about me too. I tell the truth, and I tell the truth in love, because I think it's just important that you have to get better. And then I think one thing that we got to be very careful about is that we're growing fast. There's lots of change in ownership. There's lots of development, and then new facilities necessarily. But lots of acquisitions, reopening closed buildings, new owners, new organizations growing. So maybe the facilities aren't, but there are lots of new organizations that are growing very, very, very fast. I want to caution operators. You have to be mindful of fast growth. And our sector history says ends in disaster. You grow too fast and you don't do it right, it ends in disaster. We have story after story. I've been around long enough where I've seen it. Beverly Enterprises in the early 90s got up to 700 nursing homes in one company in 40-some states. And it becomes an unmanageable behemoth because ultimately this is very much a local business. And it is management intensive. You have to have people looking at everything. And I would say you ought to grow your leaders before you acquire your buildings. You should be building your bench of leaders and once you have a leader ready, that's when you acquire a building versus acquiring a bunch of buildings and hiring whoever you can to fill them and hoping for the best. That's not a good strategy. So I think one thing that I'm seeing that concerns me that I would urge operators to do is just to be mindful of your growth, making sure that your growth is manageable, that you're comfortable. If I take on these buildings, I can sleep at night, that those folks that are in that building are going to be well cared for, and that the systems are in place to make sure that. And if you feel good about it, and hey, go for it. I want you to grow and I want you to be successful. So that's one biggie. I think the other thing, that I think operators need to be very, very mindful about, they have to be mindful of the fact that it takes us all to stay together to win. When we talk about public policy, when we talk about the forces as it relates to public perception, as it relates to, public policy, and again, the oblivious policymaker who's intransigent, you got all these very forces, an irrational regulatory system, and an under-resourced payment system. You got all these different factors just pressing on us. And, when you think about it, that is an insanely challenging environment to operate in. And, ultimately, the way that we succeed in that environment is to stay together. We have to stay together. So what does that mean? We got policymakers love the divided opinions.
Because they can pick whichever side that works for them.
They can do nothing and take your money, take your investment, they can take all the political capital they get to take for free. But when the entire sector comes and says, I want something, and we're marching together with one voice as a united front, strategically deploying our resources and supporting those folks that support our interests, we become an insanely powerful force. And frankly, put ourselves in a position to actually be successful on a variety of issues. There's a temptation always to sort of splinter because, I have some parochial issue that's important to me. And Cliff, you don't see it. It's important. Well, listen, man. Steve, I get it's important. I'm going to help you. But I can't make that a national thing because that's just a thing in Missouri, as an example. That's not a national thing. So I know it's like life, it's existential to you in Missouri, but I can't make it a public position for us nationally because it's in the fact. I don't want anything to do with you guys. I'm not wasting my money spending. That's the wrong attitude. That's not smart. You just had to think of things strategically, and again, look at us as a risk management proposition. And frankly, the more to the degree that we can stay united together, the more impactful we can be to actually play offense and move things forward. We've done a great job on defense. We got to move things forward. But the only way that we do that is if we're united, stick together.
Those are both so powerful and good points. And the funny part to me is, as I'm listening to you say it, is that both of them literally are just common sense. Don't grow before you know how you're going to manage your growth. Don't splinter off and think you're going to be as powerful than a group. It's common sense, but people's own, I guess their perspective or their own agenda is pushing them away from thinking because they're not thinking rationally. And you're just telling them, be rational. And
be cool.
Yeah.
Be cool. You just got to be cool. You do. Honestly, you're so right. Our business, I always say to people, we're not, this isn't AI. We're not AI scientists here. We all sit with PhDs in a room and they think all these cool inventions. This is not the kind of people we are. We're not built that way. We're kind of basic people, and we're kind of common sense type people. And we like caring for people. And this business is just that, it's very much common sense. And, we just have to resist the urge and the emotional response to situations and always remain as pragmatic as we can and strategic as we can. And again, I learned that in my 20s, Steve. You learn that when you get a bad survey and, you got to learn to be cool. And this survey is not speaking the truth. Our building. Yeah, they gave me an IJ and this and that and that. I think they're wrong. And I know that this came down from whatever region, that the facility's in. But this doesn't reflect my people. So I'm gonna be cool and I'm gonna manage this in a way that evokes confidence from my staff. Let them know that I'm taking care of them and I got their back. but it also evokes confidence in the regulators so they can get off my back and then get back to taking care of people. So it's that simple. It really
It also makes it more functional. Instead of just asking why they did it and being upset at the surveyor, what can I do about it to get past it? Just be pragmatic instead of just being stuck in your own head. Absolutely.
no doubt.
So talking about being cool, I picked up, tell me if I'm right, a motto that you say is go out there and play. Is that a motto that you say often? What are you referring to when you say that?
Well, okay, so you're quoting something. So,
That's why I'm at. I want to play a game with you, but I want to know if that's what you meant.
God play. Well, it's a little bit deeper than that. So, those that are watching this, you will notice that I'm African American. Maybe if you hear it, you see my face, you will. And early in my career, there was a lot of discussion. It was hard in the beginning. I was I think the second practicing African American administrator in the history of the state of Virginia, and that was in the late 80s. It was not easy to necessarily enter at that time the profession. I always had a philosophy: I'm just going to go play. So that's the determinants, and so I could focus on, all the forces that may or may not want me to be here. May or may not have the confidence in me, may or may not want to give me a chance. My motto always was anyone that took that position, I was going to make sure that they regretted that decision. And then that meant I was going to go out and I was going to play. So in my office, if you ever come to my office, there's a giant picture I have of Jackie Robinson in front of Ebbets Field. And that was something he used to say. I'm just going to go out and play. And so anyway, I stole it from him.
So you just go out there, do your thing. Don't worry about the naysayers. You go out there and do your best, and the rest kind of falls into place.
Metrics are metrics, baby. I'm go out there and win. You go out there and win. If you had the nerve and you were dumb enough to basically take a position against me based on how I look or some other stupid reason, I'm going to make that decision the worst decision you ever. It's just like, that is going to be the dumbest. You dumb. But more importantly, I'm going to make sure you know it based on the fact that when you see what I was able to accomplish or whatever I was able to do, you're going to be like, why in the world did we not put this guy on our team?
You're going to act so that any doubt they ever had.
So go out and play it. That's it.
I like it. So talking about going out and play, we're going to end off the podcast. We're going to play something. You're familiar with ad libs, where I'm going to ask you to fill in certain blanks. We're going to do SNF ad libs, where we're going to make a fake ad for a skilled nursing facility, and you're going to be providing us with the info, Cliff. So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. I'll write it down here, and then we'll hopefully have something interesting afterwards. So let's start off. Please give me any type of tree, whatever comes to your mind.
Oak.
A body of water, any size.
The Red Sea.
I'm going to go with C to be less specific. Okay. Tell us about maybe when you grew up, a small local paper that probably none of us ever heard of, but you're familiar with.
Ooh.
What did you read as a kid?
All right. The Howard County Times.
Love it. Please name an outdoor recreational activity.
Fishing.
An indoor recreational activity.
Basketball.
An adjective that means amazing, phenomenal.
Spectacular.
Love it. We're almost done. A name of an injury that someone may need to go to a facility for.
Hip fracture.
You're like, where is he going with this? A hobby.
Oh man, ceramics.
And tell me a word that's associated with ceramics.
Kiln.
Kiln. Wow.
K-I-L-N.
Yes, I'm familiar with the word. My kids do ceramics from time to time. Here goes. Here is our skilled nursing facility ad created by you, Clif. Are you or a family member considering a nursing facility? Well, look no further. AHCA Rehab is just the place for you. Not only have we been voted best nursing home by the Howard County Times, but we've also been recognized as a leading facility in therapy. CMS has rated us 5 stars, and so will you. After visiting our beautiful facility with brand new fishing pond and basketball gym, our spectacular staff and our therapy staff is spectacular too. We even have some people faking hip fractures just to get in and enjoy our facility. So if some of you know how to fall, our short-term rehab can put the spring back in their step. See what we did there? Fall spring. AHCA Rehab, the facility that helps you roll right back into making ceramics faster than you can say kiln. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. Thanks for playing, Clif. Maybe we'll use this one day. You never know.
I'm in. You got a basketball court and a fishing pond. I want to be there.
Right? You said you're worried about what it'll be like when you get there. Let's start setting up the, everything so it'll be enjoyable.
Now, I'm going to OC.
I love it. Clif, thanks so much for playing along, and thanks for joining me. It's really been great, and I know everybody listening really is going to enjoy it. So thanks for your time. I know you're a busy person. We really, really do appreciate it.
Steve, thank you. Enjoyed it, and thanks to everybody for listening.